Okay guys, welcome back. I'd like us to do a little bit of work on the user's profile so we can actually see something that concerns the user. Okay, so I just created a little template right here that we're going to be using, because when we're going to come to the money part, we're going to need maybe a way for the user to update his card and stuff like that. So I decided to create, a vertical tab system right here. Okay, so you can actually just copy this from the template. It's really easy. Okay, so we're gonna also be editing the user's profile and stuff like that, but first I want us to tackle this. We can get the lessons completed for the user, and we can get the series being watched. Okay, so remember, this is just HTML that I'm just using. So what we're gonna do is actually drive out the number of lessons completed and series being watched test, so we can actually have those methods. Then we're just gonna use them in our view. Okay, so let's go ahead to our user test, and we're gonna create a test to make sure that we can get the number of lessons completed. Or actually, we should start with the series being watched. Okay, so we're gonna say test all series being watched by user. Okay, so what do we want? We want to create a user. We want to create some lessons for series. Okay, so let's say we'll need to flush our database because we'll be working with Redis. Create a user, create a lesson or two. Let me just paste that in right now. So we have one series, right? So why don't we create a second series, and this series is going to be having lesson 3, and we'll also have lesson 4 for this series. So therefore, for lesson 4 to belong to series 2, we just need to specify series ID right here, and we'll map that to 2. Okay, so what we have now is 2 lessons belonging to series 1 and 2 lessons belong to series 2. Okay, so that's our range step. Now for our action, we'll complete some lessons in series 1 and 2. Okay, remember, this is how we used to know if the user has actually started the series, if he has completed at least one of the lessons in that series. Then once we complete those lessons, we'll run some assertions. We'll call our method to get the series that this user is watching, and then we'll assert that series 1 is among, and also assert that series 2 is among. Okay, so what we can do is, let's just create another series for our own security. So we're gonna have 5 and 6. So 5 and 6 belong to series ID 3. Okay, so we have 3 series right now, and then we're also gonna assert at the end that series 3 is not among the list of series that this user is watching. Okay, now let's go ahead and complete lesson 1 and lesson 3. So user complete lesson, and we'll pass in lesson, and then user complete lesson, and we'll pass in lesson 3. Okay, so we've completed this for series 1 and we've completed this for series 2. Therefore, we've not completed anything for series 3, meaning that this user is watching series 1 and 2 but he's not watching 3. Therefore, the next thing we need to do is get the started series. Okay, so started series, or the series that this user is watching. So we'll say get this by calling user series being watched method. Okay, so this is the method that we call to get all the series that are being watched by this user. Then we need to decide what type of data this method should be returning to us. Okay, so why don't we receive a collection of series, and I think this is gonna actually be helpful. So now we need to run our assertions knowing that we want a collection of series. So we're gonna first of all say assert instance of illuminate support collection class, and we'll pass in started series. And then the next assertion is to make sure that that collection is actually a collection of series. So we would call assert instance of, but this time we'll be checking that it's an instance of the bestcourses series class, and we'll get any random element from that collection. And finally, just like we did in the other test, I want to get the IDs single-handedly from this. So I'm just going to say IDs of started series will be equals to started series pluck only the IDs, and then I'll just say all. So it returns to me an ID the IDs of all of these started series. Okay, then I'll say this, a search row in array, and we need to pass in the needle. So we'll say lesson, which is lesson 1, and we'll get the series, and we'll get the ID, and we'll pass in the haystack, which is IDs of started series. Okay, so we also have to do exactly the same thing for lesson 3, because this is lesson 3, we are completing it, which means lesson series 2 also should be inside this ID. So lesson 3 series ID should be here, and then we're gonna do the same thing for lesson 4, but it's gonna be false. So actually for lesson 5 or 6, anyone. Okay, so assert false that lesson 6 ID is inside this series. Okay, so this is a really long test, so let's go ahead and go through it before we start running our test. First, we want to get all the series being watched by this user. So we clear our Redis database, then we get the user, a new user, we create some series. So right here we've created series 1 and we've added 2 lessons to that series. Here we've also created series 2 and we've added 2 lessons to that series, and we've also created a third series and we've added 2 lessons to that series. Now we've made the user to start watching series 1 by completing 1 lesson in series 1, and we've also made the user to start watching series 2 by completing 1 lesson in series 2 right here. Okay, then we get all the started series by getting this method series being watched, and then we assert that what is returned to us is a collection, and what is returned inside that collection are series, and then we get all the IDs from this collection, and then we assert that the ID of series 1 is actually in that array, ID of series 2 is actually in that array, but ID of series 3 is not. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this test to see what we get. PHP unit filter to this test. Okay, so call some defined method series being watched. So we'll head over to our learning.php and we'll create that method series being watched. Okay, so let's run that again. And now failed asserting that null is an instance of Illuminate support collection. Okay, so this is where we have to talk about how we want this to work. Okay, so first of all, remember, this is how we are saving our records in the database. Okay, so user ID, then series, and then series ID. Okay, and this is all we have in our Redis database. What we can do is to get all the keys for a particular user for any series, then we can pass in a wildcard to our Redis database and then find any key that ends with this and that has the user's ID. I'm gonna show you what I mean. Remember, for this user, if we want to get maybe user 1 series 1, it means we are getting all the completed lessons for user 1 and series 1. Same thing if the user was watching series 2. Okay, so same thing if the user was watching series 2, we're gonna have user 1 series 2, and if the user was watching series 3, we're gonna have user 1 and we're gonna have series 3. Okay, so what you notice is this is the only thing that changes, the series number right here. So we can tell the database to give us all the keys which have user 1 and which have series, and then we'll put a wildcard right here to get all of these records. Okay, so if we have all of these records in our database, then we pass in this key. What is going to happen is we're going to have all of this sent back to us. Therefore, when we receive all of this, we know the user is watching series 1, series 2, series 3, and we can now extract this ID to get the series from the database and send in a collection. Okay, so let's get to it. We'll get the keys. So we'll say keys equals Redis, and Redis has a keys method, and we can pass in a wildcard. So Redis is going to search in its store to see if we have keys that match this pattern. So what we'll do is we'll call user, and then we'll call this ID, and then colon, and we'll call series and column, and then we'll pass in an asterisk to show a wildcard. So we have 1, 2, 3 right here. It's going to be returned to us. Okay, then we can now extract or find the series from the database with these keys. So what is going to be returned to us is going to be an array of maybe user 1 series 2 and user 1 series 1, okay, depending on the number of lessons or series that the user is watching. Then when we have these keys, we can use a for each loop to loop through each and every one of these keys, because remember we have an array, but we need to return a collection. So for each, and then I'll just call end for each right here, and I'll say keys as key. And what we'll be doing is right here, I'm just going to show you what we'll do. We'll get series ID by calling explode, which is a PHP function. I'm going to explain what it does. I would say the delimiter is a colon, and we'll pass in key right there. Okay, so if you read out what our explode function does, it returns an array of strings, each of which is a substring of string formed by splitting it into boundaries formed by the string delimiter. Okay, so this is what it's gonna do. If we have user 1 colon 1 colon series colon 3, then our explode function is going to give us an array as such. So user, then 1, then series, and then 3. Okay, so it's going to take this delimiter that we passed in, so this column right here, and it's going to use it to break this string into an array. Okay, so for example, if we had a string, it can be maybe a string with commas. If you want to break each and every one of these parts into an array, you just use to explode and you use the comma. Okay, so now we have an array as such, and for us to get this element, we can just get it right here. So we will say get the element with the key of 3, the index of 3, okay, because this is 0 1 2 3, so we can get the element of index of 3, which is the series ID. Okay, then now that we have that series ID, we can actually store it in an array. So let me just create a series IDs array right here. Okay, and then after we have this, we can just say array push, which is a PHP method, and we can push in to the series IDs array, and the value we're pushing is series ID. Once we have the ID of the series, we'll push it into this array. And then remember, we want our method to get a collection and return to us. Okay, so what we're going to do is get series collection is going to be equals to collect series IDs. Okay, so now we have a collection of IDs. Then we'll just map over it, that collection, pass in a closure, and right here we're gonna have access to the ID. Okay, so then we're gonna return series find ID. Okay, so this is our collection. We simply get that collection by creating collect on the series IDs array, and then we can map through that collection, and then for each of the elements in that collection, we are simply going to find the series with that ID and then return it. Okay, so for us to actually use series, we have to import it at the top. So use bestcourses series, and then right down at the bottom, we can actually return this. Okay, so return the collection once we finish mapping over it. Okay, so that is a lot. Okay, we've done a lot on this method. We're gonna go through it, but now let's just focus on trying to see if we're actually on track. Okay, so let's run that test again. Okay, the test is successful, right? So it just succeeds because we've gone through everything, and I think we've done the right thing. So in the very next video, I'm gonna go through each and every one of these steps that we've covered, and we're gonna refactor. And if you have any ideas about how to make this better, don't hesitate, go ahead and share. But we're gonna go through what we did right here because there's a lot to learn. Okay, so see you in the very next video.